I'm losing my mind. I cannot focus right now, guys. This list was impossible to put together. My top 10 reads of the year. I thought this was going to be easy. You know, I've read a lot of books. I've raved about a lot of books. I was just going to pick the ones I raved about and rave about them some more. I've read a lot of good books. I've read a lot of really good series. There is too many books I want to talk about, and I hate ranking them. I thought it was going to be fun to put them in order, see what my top 10 were. And then in putting this list together, guys, it's been torturous. I don't want to rank. These are like ranking children. There are some clear favorites, of course. Like we always have, there's a kid that always stands out if you're from siblings. But sometimes a lot of them you love the same. And that's kind of like what the list is today. We've gone through, I've got you my top 10 fantasy books from the year. There is one sci-fi in there, but it's a sci-fantasy. So, we're going to chuck it on the list because it was an incredible book and incredible series. I've given myself the rule of only one book per series, just so this list isn't primarily made of 3 main series, because that'd get a little bit boring for you guys. And I want to give this list some variety, and there's a lot of variety because in giving this 10, there was 5 standouts that didn't even make the top 10 that I still wanted to give an extra mention to. So without further ado, we're going to be going through 15 books, 5 special mentions unranked, then a top 10 list. These are the top 15 books from the 101 I read this year, only 1 book per series. Number 1 and 2 on this list are clearly defined. They have their spot. There is no unseating them. But ranks 3 through 10, they are all so close, you can put them anywhere. I'm not going to argue with you in the comments. Actually, I will. I love it when you guys get going in the comments. It's very fun. So make sure down in the comments you let me know your top 10 books from this year and what you think of my top 10 list, because it's interesting. I didn't see the list panning out the way it did, but ranking it was impossible. So I need you guys to help me with the ranking. So let's get some discussions going in the comments about this list and about your guys' list. And come on, while you're down there commenting, like the damn video, please, and subscribe. We talk fun bookish things here. This community has been growing so much recently. It is just so heartwarming to see. But now it is time for the special mentions. 5 books, unranked, not all fantasy, but just incredible reads. The furthest away from fantasy, No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. Cormac's writing I discovered this year for the first time with The Road, and then I went into this one, read this one in a sitting. Just a Western set in Texas a few years after Vietnam. A detective story, a murder mystery, a Vietnam veteran getting caught up in a drug scandal with a big bag of money, with a hunter chasing after him. Cormac's writing packs a punch. It is super simple, but highly effective. I am going to be reading more of his works next year because of this. And if you haven't read any Cormac McCarthy yet, it's probably worth checking him out. He's very popular for a reason. He's very good. But because it's a special mention, we won't give it too much time. We'll move on to the next one, which is Salem's Lot by Stephen King. Cormac McCarthy and Stephen King were 2 authors I really wanted to check out this year. So I read a few books of each, and Salem's Lot was my favorite by Stephen King. The way he can just so easily get into a character's head, bring the world that he's building to life. So obviously with Stephen King's book, it's set in our world, but I really felt when I was reading Salem's Lot, I was in Maine in 1975. I wasn't born until well after 1975, but I felt like I was in that time when I read the book. It felt eerie. It felt mysterious. I felt like I was just part of the town, like I was just a fly on the wall to everyone in the town's days. The way that he would do chapters where you just start in the morning with someone at 4 a.m, then at 5 a.m. you're with someone else doing their job, then at 6 a.m. you're with the bus driver, then at 7 a.m. you're at the graveyard with the guy working there. Those was just super interesting. I never read anything like that before. This is my first time reading a Stephen King book, and I was sold from the beginning. He's definitely an author I will be reading more of next year. The third special mention, starting to bring it closer to the fantasy world, was Catching Fire, the second Hunger Games book. I had no expectations going into the Hunger Games, except that 2 of my best friends told me they absolutely loved it and they thought I'd like it, and they were right. I read this through. Catching Fire was the first book I finished in 2024, and it still stuck with me. It wasn't anything like I expected it would be. I thought it would be just Katniss being the hero and saving the day and leading this rebellion. But the way that the rebellion tries to use Katniss, the way that she's still just the young girl just trying to find her way. Oh, so much about the Hunger Games is just phenomenal. It's a series that blew me away this year and that I haven't talked about enough on the channel. But if you haven't read it yet, this is a series everyone should probably read, in my opinion at least, whatever worth that is. Then the second to last special mention is a novella for the series The Illuminae Files by J. Kristoff and Amie Kaufman. The novella is called Memento, and it's a prequel novella that takes place before the first book. This was just so fun. I just sat down, read it in a sitting, and this was basically AI meets the trolley problem. So do you risk taking one life to save more lives in the future? Having an AI discover that was super interesting and helped set up the series in a very interesting way. The way these stories are told through a series of hacked documents, so it's more like reading Dracula than just reading a regular novel. The humor that J. Kristoff adds to it, absolutely phenomenal. This is a really fun series that if you don't mind a bit of a immature tone from young characters, you can have a good time with. And it's just so fresh with the way it's written. I'm having a blast with this series. I'm on the last book now. Now, for the last special mention, George R.R. Martin. I actually am surprised this didn't make the main list. I think it's just because there just wasn't enough of it, George. I just wanted more. I need more Dunk and Egg. This is the third best character dynamic I've read all year. The others will be mentioned in the top 10 list, but Dunk and Egg just are a hilarious duo. Super interesting. I loved getting back to the world of Westeros and reading something new from that world because I've read all the Song of Ice and Fire books a long time ago, and I haven't had anything like that since, and I'm really missing those books, especially after reading that. So A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms definitely did the job there and deserves to be that special mention for this list. So the top 10. This one I still haven't decided on. I brought out 2 Abercrombie books from First Law. The Last Argument of Kings stuck with me more, the final to the First Law trilogy, just wrapping up this epic fantasy in just such a fun way. I didn't really have any expectations going into First Law, except that Abercrombie's humor and characters were supposed to be really good. That is exactly what I got. But the way that Abercrombie writes his stories, or the way he writes First Law, was just really fun. It was super fun. He writes classic fantasy. Like, it's a classic hero's journey sort of tale, but without the classic characters. We don't have a hero's journey in this book because our character that is doing the hero's journey is an asshole, is a twat, is so spoiled, and is not competent at all. And that's the cast as a whole. We don't have one main character like in a hero's journey. We just have the same type of story that you would in a hero's journey, with very morally grey characters, people that aren't great, people that aren't competent, people that are competent but are messed up in other ways, just going about that same sort of story. So it just makes it super fun. So I've talked myself into The Last Argument of Kings taking number 10 on the list, but Best Served Cold was also phenomenal. And I feel like the writing was better here. And it was also really fun just getting a revenge story that takes place in 7 parts over the 7 deadly sins. And it was a great time. Abercrombie is wit. Very good. Very, very good at wit. His world building gets better with each book. His ability to weave the story felt like it got better every book. But I was having fun from page 1 of The Blade itself. I loved Giselle and Glockter. Those 2 were the highlights for me. Logan Ninefingers was a bit too boring. He was a bit too much of the old grizzled warrior that you'd get in your hero's journey. Giselle was an absolute twat. He just was so painful that it was just an interesting read. And Glockter, like, you don't usually get the torturer as your main character. He's usually on the side. But you get your torturer front and center. Phenomenal. So for gritty, descriptive, funny writing with phenomenal characters, First Law takes number 10. Coming at number 9, well, this feels too low. I'm not going to say it that at 9. I'm going to actually move that up. So at number 9, we'll actually have Silence is Silver by Andrew Watson. This is like a 70-page novella, by the way, guys. Andrew Watson also has a channel on BookTube. You probably know of him because he has a really good channel. His series, The Shadowbinders, has a prequel novella called Silence is Silver, and this book follows a side character from the main series, which I haven't read yet. I will be reading it in 2025 because of how much I love this novella. That reminded me so much of Dune, but set in a fantasy world. We're just following someone from a cult that lives out in the desert, a very like warrior culture, very religious culture. And this guy, he's just going through his challenges to become a man, trying to find out what his purpose in his life is going to be, where he's going to fit into this society when he comes out of the academy. And it goes through his trials, and I was hooked the whole time. I read this in a sitting. Obviously, it wasn't very long, so it wasn't much of a sitting, but I was actually at a sporting event when I was reading this because I just picked it up before I had to go, and then I couldn't put it down. I read it on the way, and when I was there, super gripping. The writing style was very pretty, very descriptive, and a little bit philosophical. Like, it just left you thinking, and I did not expect to like this as much as I did. So great work, Andrew. I can't wait to get into Harbinger of Justice in 2025. At number 8, this book is getting marked down because there was a plot line that I was a little bored with, and I read it in March, so I can't remember as clearly as the other books above it on the list, except for a couple. And that book is Deadhouse Gates, the second book in Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. Steven Erikson is one of the best writers I've ever read. I put him at number 3 on my writers I discovered in 2024 list, and he could have easily been number 2, just except I've read more Hobb, and Hobb just is made for my brain. Her writing is just, it just melds into my head. It is so cozy, so I just had to put her a little bit higher. But there's nothing Steven does wrong. He does everything to perfection. It's like the writing style and characters of Abercrombie, but with the world building of nothing. There's nothing to compare the world building of Malazan to. It is so far and above all my other favorite worlds. It's not comparable. I honestly can't think of another world that comes close to Malazan in just the scope of epicness. Like, if you combined Empire of the Vampire with 5 Warrior Angels and the Stormlight Archive, you'd be getting close. Maybe. No, it's not even close. It's not even close. The world building is just out of this world. It's insane. It's huge. I am actually going to be starting a Malazan read from the start again in January, which I am just beyond excited for. Both Gardens of the Moon and Deadhouse Gates were 2 of my funnest reads. I read them in like 4 days. I could not put these books down once I started them. Sorry, I lost track of my train of thought. Steven Erikson's writing, descriptive, rich, great characters, dark, gritty, epic world building. It all flows together in the end. If people say it's messy, it's not. These stories just work together. We are following an empire while it's at a pivotal moment. The Empire is the main character of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, so don't worry about trying to figure out every little bit of each character. Just get the feel of the character, enjoy the... I just want to pick up this series, sorry. I'm rambling so hard. It's incredible. There's a storyline in Deadhouse Gates that has still stuck with me 9 months later. I can't forget it. Coltane and Dyker, 2 of the best characters I've read this year. And The Chain of Dogs is peak fiction. I wish every storyline was like that storyline. I can't wait to get back to Malazan. Steven's an incredible writer. Let's move on to number 7, and that's going to be The Blackest Heart by Brian Lee Durfee. So Brian Lee Durfee's 5 Warrior Angels series, I've talked quite a bit about on this channel recently, but The Blackest Heart is the middle book. So Lonesome Crown is the final book. The Forgetting Moon is book 1, and my favorite was book 2. So with this being a 5-book series that Brian has turned into a trilogy, there is a lot covered in this. This is a huge epic fantasy world, and it takes a lot of classic inspired world building, elves, dwarves, humans, dragons, orcs, but outside of the humans, which he just makes all morally grey, there's no good humans, he does a little twist on the elves, the dwarves, the orcs to make them even darker. This is a grim, grim world. I really love this cover because not only is it stunning artwork, but it encapsulates the series so well. You just feel like there's just no sun. There's no hope. There's nothing good in this series. The characters are slimy and grim. You're not going to be cheering for your hero in this. It's a hero's journey tale. It's the faithful and the fallen, but just morally black characters, just evil, evil, evil characters, horrible people. But it's a really compelling hero's journey story, really good plot, very similar to the plot of The Faithful and the Fallen. There's a huge battle at the end, which went a bit too long, which is why the last book wasn't my favorite. It was my second favorite. The Blackest Heart was just the most perfectly paced book of the series, and the main characters were a little less slimy, so it was a bit easier to get into them during the story. But beautiful writing. Brian's prose is on a really high level. It reminds me of a Williams, a Hobb, a Martin, just with darker content and not as great characters. So I compare Brian to all of my favorite authors. It's just his character work isn't on the same level, so it a little bit annoys me because his world-building, plot, and prose is all elite. It's all so good. It's all like Tad Williams and George R. R. Martin and Robin Hobb, and the characters aren't quite there. But in saying that, great dark fantasy series. I highly recommend checking it out. Now, I honestly can't remember what number we're up to. I think we're up to number 6 now, which is going to be so fun. The Butcher's Masquerade, Book 5 in Dungeon Crawler Carl. I can't rate these books separately. I just think of the series as one big whole, and my enjoyment goes up and up with every entry, so that's why we're putting The Butcher's Masquerade. But I don't have anything specific to say for The Butcher's Masquerade. I love all these books just increasingly more the more time I get to spend with Carl and Donut and Cartier, and the more the politics grows. If you haven't checked out Dungeon Crawler Carl yet, what are you doing? When I started checking this out at the start of the year, no one was talking about it. Everyone's talking about Dungeon Crawler Carl now. You can't go online without seeing someone mention it. You should know what it's about already. You need to check it out. This series is not overrated. It is the one series that actually lives up to the hype it gets. And yes, it sounds silly. I've made videos talking about the concept, how basically the end of the world has come, aliens have come, killed most of the humans. They've given the few remaining survivors a chance to survive by chucking them into an 18-level dungeon that is a game show that plays out like a video game where you have to win sponsors from the viewers and just make it through each level. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's so fun. We get a super compelling plot. You are in a dungeon. There is levels. You go through the levels. Boom, plot, easy. Just make it through the level. Then there's a deeper plot. Oh, there's politics as well, because Carl is trying to fight back against the hosts of the game show. The hosts of the game show are having trouble with this galactic empire because of money and stuff. There is so many politics going on. There's intrigue and mystery, but then there's just, oh, no, video game plot. Let's just make it through the level. And then there's sponsors and other characters, and it all adds up. It's brilliant. The humor, fantastic. It's so funny. Really good humor. Really easy to read. Audiobooks are fantastic. Now, if you are one person out there saying you have to do the audiobooks, stop it. Stop it. No. Yes, they are the best audiobooks ever made. I agree with you. People should be doing this on audio, but don't say you can only do audio. You can read these books and have a great time. I read the first 2 books and loved it. Great experience. Did not take away from it at all. If someone doesn't like audiobooks but they like reading, just get them the physical book. It is a great book. That is my rant for Dungeon Crawler Carl and the audiobooks. Over. Don't be off-putting. Let someone read it if they want to read it. Yes, it's a great audiobook. I agree. But don't be off-putting with your recommendations. Leave that for me. Let me be off-putting. You just do the charming, all right? Now, number 5, Curse of the MistWraith by Janny Wurts. Loved it so much, I read it twice. I was telling a friend about it to get them to start the series, and we were going to read from book 2 onwards. But just talking about book 1 to sell them on it, I sold myself on it, and I read it again with her, and it was an absolute blast. This is the first book in the Wars of Light and Shadow series. I've talked a lot about this and Janny Wurts recently of all my wrap-up videos. So very quickly, it's a combination of Malazan, Wheel of Time, and Robin Hobb. Writing style, exactly that. Beautiful prose, dense, poetic. You've got to take your time with it, but it matches my brain chemistry very easily. Some books are just a little bit too plain and I can't focus enough because they're just a bit too simple. This makes me focus and it takes up my whole attention span. So I immerse so deeply into this world. It is huge. The characters are fantastic and it's just classic fantasy. And if you are looking for classic fantasy, if you're a big fan of Robin Hobb and The Wheel of Time, and you just want something a little bit more, that more like Malazan, just denser, more going on, you have to check out The Wars of Light and Shadow by Janny Wurts. That's all I'll say because I have raved and raved and raved about Janny Wurts recently. And if you want to start the series, guys, the book club, we're reading The Gallant, the prequel novella for this series in January. Link down in the description, completely free. It's going to be fun. I have talked too much about it though recently. So going on to number 4, Going Postal by Terry Pratchett. I don't own the physical novel, but I picked this up from my local book nook the other day for free because, it's Discworld. I'm going to be reading it eventually. Terry Pratchett has very quickly become one of my favorite authors of all time with the way he could just write such a whimsical, quirky story that is so compelling with great characters and just the best humor that will have you laughing the whole time with some really good quality social commentary. I did not realize how much I loved this at the time, but my brain just continually goes back to Going Postal. Just hanging out with a con man, Moist von Lipwig, as he is forced into community service and he has to bring up the post office that has just been out of the whole post office is just full of stacks and stacks of mail, and they have to compete with a big corporation that run the Clax system, the modern form of communication, and just seeing his business savvy trying to get the post office running with his really cheeky manner and a whimsical, fun writing style. These books were just the most fun time. In book 1, Going Postal, Moist von Lipwig, he's getting the post office going again. In book 2, making money, he's getting the bank up and running really again. So this is just Terry Pratchett's time to talk about communication and money, and then the railway systems at the end. Really good stuff. I love Discworld. The world that is, just reaching its industrial revolution. Things are starting to get moving in the town. You get Vinatieri, the dictator that is just a political mastermind in the background, played by Charles Dance in the adaptation, by the way. Incredible. Loved that movie. I don't watch many movies. That is one I had to watch because of how much I love this book. I think you should check out Discworld. I really think you should check out Discworld if you haven't already. Going Postal is an unconventional starting point. I understand that. But I'm so happy I started there because Moist was an easy character to connect to. These books actually have chapters, unlike most of Terry's books, because Terry's a legend and doesn't want to conform to chapters because his stories are continuous. They don't have a beginning and ending. They're just continuous. You can start with Guards. You can start with The Color of Magic. I just think you should start. Phenomenal writing. So quirky. It's such a quirky world, but it just feels whimsical and fun. You should check out Terry Pratchett. Now, number 3. This was a hard one to pick as well because I was only able to pick one book by Robin Hobb from the Realm of the Elderlings. And picking between Assassin's Quest and Ship of Magic was very, very challenging. Fitz is my favorite character, but the character dynamics, the family drama that is Ship of Magic was so good. And I think that wins out in my brain, but in my heart, it just always comes back to Fitz and Farseer. Fitz is the most human character I have ever read. Assassin's Quest is the divisive book of the Farseer series. Everyone seems to just like, not love, like Assassin's Apprentice. Everyone loves Royal Assassin. Then Assassin's Quest divides. About 30% of us love this because it's just a journey of self-discovery for Fitz. He's refinding himself after the events of Royal Assassin, and he's just going about his business. So I find that very interesting because I'm invested in Fitz so deeply at this point. I just want to go through every little bit of self-discovery and self-growth that he just goes through in this book. The actual story and the plot itself moves incredibly slowly. So if you're not invested in Fitz's mental state, you're probably not going to enjoy Assassin's Quest. I loved it because of just the deep dive into the most human character I've ever read. So at number 3, we have Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. But just be certain, if there was no rule on how many books per series I could have, Ship of Magic would be on this list. Royal Assassin would be on this list. 2 incredible books. Also, just the writing style is so cozy. Whenever I read a Robin Hood book, there's no point where I'm like trying to find my way and get used to her writing again. I'm just instantly immersed. I'm instantly just got a cozy feeling. I feel like I'm rugged up under a blanket in front of a fire in the middle of winter, and I'm there, straight into the head of my characters. It's just always a great time, even when it's a frustrating time. Like Ship of Magic is painful. The characters it's just nails on a chalkboard, but it's beautiful. It's a symphony of nails on a chalkboard. So then there were 2 books. The absolute standouts. Realm of the Elderlings is incredible and will be one of my favorite series of all time. But when it comes to books this year, there was 2 standouts. Empire of the Damned by J. Kristoff and Demon in White by Christopher Ruocchio. Now, you could put Kingdoms of Death here too. I go back and forth every day with which one was better, Demon in White or Kingdoms of Death. But Demon in White, our number 2 book of the year. Yes, Empire of the Damned is number 1. Was there ever really a question? You know me. But Demon in White is just where Sun Eater really finds itself. In book 1, it's an interesting book. It's Christopher showing off he's a good writer, he's showing off his world, and he's showing the plot is over there. In book 2, we find the plot. In book 3, we run with the plot. There is not a wasted page on this book. I constantly think about rereading it. I don't, because I want to talk about new books for you guys, and I've made lots of videos about Sun Eater. You definitely should check out my most recent one. It's pretty fun. Actually, yes, I made 2 dedicated videos to single series in the last few months. That was just about these 2 books, that says anything about how much I loved these series. But there is no wasted moment. We start off with the first 30% of this book, straight into battle, straight into war. Then the book slows down. In the middle point of this book, our political intrigue, our political side of the story really starts. We really get to know the political players and the maneuvering starts happening. We get a really good scene, where you get to see something that Christopher set up in a previous book really start to pay off, and like, oh yeah, Christopher knows what he's doing. Then we get that again. We go back to a journey of discovery. We go back to research and an archaeological site. We're finding information, and it's like, oh, this is getting interesting. This is getting interesting. It's like, oh, whoa, holy shit, that is crazy. And then boom, straight back to the most insane space battle you'll ever get. Just incredible space opera. Really good. Oh. I told myself I would not reread this series before the new one came out, but just talking about this book has me wanting to pick it up. Christopher's writing is incredibly beautiful. He is also one of the best writers I've ever read. So when you've got an incredible plot, an incredible story, just phenomenal series. I really think you should check out Sun Eater. Just be warned, book 1 is slow. Book 2 is also slow into the last 20%. And then the series is a sprint from there. I wasn't the biggest fan of the last book, but most people were. So don't be put off the last book because of me, because most people loved it so much. But guys, there was never a question. I don't actually own a physical copy of this book, which is kind of crazy. But Empire of the Damned, the second book in the Empire of the Vampire series by J. Kristoff. I read it twice this year. I saw my friends were doing a buddy read of it, and I couldn't not read it. I rave about this series so much. It is the most fun time. Gabriel de Leon, our main character in the Empire of the Vampire, is just the funniest guy. He is the old grizzled warrior, like a Logan Ninefingers, but he just loves to talk about himself like Quoth, like Quoth from The Name of the Wind. But he's not an arse like Quoth. He's not up himself. He kind of is, like he's definitely up himself and talks about himself very highly. But he is deeply flawed. He's deeply messed up. There is things going on with Gabriel that aren't right. His back and forth with the historian that is interviewing him from this series it makes the series what it is. The plot is obviously incredible. Day's death has come. Vampires can now walk throughout the day, and Gabriel is the last Silver Saint. He is the last warrior from this church sect that fights back against vampires. He's the last one left. There's a Holy Grail situation going on. I explained the whole plot in that video where I explained why you should read Empire of the Vampire. So you should go watch that video straight after this. But he's the last Silver Saint, the last warrior, and he is in a jail cell with a historian telling his story. The story is catching up to real time. There is a scheme going on, and I just can't wait to find out what it is in the last book. Prose, profanity, and just a profound love for this series. If you want a huge world, if you want a really dark world, if you want incredibly beautiful prose, if you want the best dialogue in all of fantasy, the best profanity in all of fantasy, you have to check out this series. I am exhausted at the moment while I'm recording this video, so I'm probably not hyping up the best I can. That's why I'm saying go check out that video. But Emperor of the Damned was easily my favorite book I discovered this year. I read it twice. I can't wait to reread it again next year before the third book comes out. And if you're watching my channel, you're going to like this book. This is just everything you want in a dark fantasy book. Humor off the charts, characters off the charts, dialogue off the charts. I'm just repeating myself. Guys, let me know what the best books you read in 2024 were. I'm aware Wind and Truth isn't on this list. I couldn't finish it, guys. I tried yesterday. I sat down and listened to the first 11 and a half hours of the audiobook. I enjoyed about 5 minutes of that. Maybe I was tired, maybe I just wasn't in the right mood, but it wasn't really for me. I've had to put it down. I delayed making this list until I'd read Wind of Truth, but I'm not sure when I'm going to read it. So this is my top 10 books of the year. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know yours. I hope Wind and Truth is on yours. I hope you all had a great time with it, and I hope I have a great time with it eventually. But thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.